Good afternoon. Welcome to another session with Ascent Royalty, powered by Ascent Radio. Today's topic, we'll be talking about the rights of a tenant under the Tenancy Law of Lagos State. So last week we spoke about the relationship between the landlord and the tenant and the eviction processes. So this week we're going to talk about the rights that you as a tenant have. So first of all, let's lay foundation on to who a landlord is and who a tenant is. A landlord is the owner of a property who gives it out to a person for a period of time, and usually for the consideration of an amount of money. So anybody basically that has a house and gives out or lets another person have access to that land, to that property for a particular time, is a landlord. And a tenant is the person who enjoys exclusive possession, the person who is in possession of that property for that particular time is the tenant. So basically, in reality, we know that some landlords try to act like lords, as the name entails, and like to act above the law. But the truth is that nobody is ever above the law, and then the law has provided tenants and protected tenants by giving them some rights, and these are the rights that we will be discussing in today's topic. So the first right is right to quiet and peaceable enjoyment of the premises. As a tenant, you have a right to be able to stay in your property and enjoy peace and quiet basically during that entire time. The landlord cannot barge into your house or act in any way that would disturb you from enjoying that premises, because you have paid. You are practically owner of the house for that period of time, so you have a right to enjoy peace and quiet in that land, in that property. Then the other one is right to privacy. So your landlord, like I said, cannot just barge into your house in claiming that, okay, I am the landlord, I still have some right over here. No, he has to take permission. He has to give you notice, prior notice, before entering into your land, and you have to also agree to allow him enter into the building. So that's our second right. Then the third right is right to freedom from unreasonable disturbance. So practically, some landlords are fond of always trying to disturb or kind of intimidate their tenants, but we have to understand that you have a right against such unreasonable disturbance. So if you know that your landlord is disturbing you unnecessarily, you should let him know that he's acting against your rights. So another right is the right to a tenancy agreement. This is very important. Basically, if you become a tenant to a landlord and there is no tenancy agreement, you are really causing a lot of trouble for yourself, because how then can you state the terms and conditions that guide your whole period in that place, in that property? So basically, your tenancy agreement is very important, because it is what helps sets out the terms and conditions for the tenancy. So you have a right to that. Make sure you do not agree to be anybody's tenant or to enter into a property without a tenancy agreement. Another right that you have is right to receive a receipt of payment. Obviously, you cannot go to a shop and buy a phone and not collect your receipt. Your receipt is what shows, is the proof, the only proof that you have that you actually paid. So it's very important that you make sure that where you pay your rent, the landlord gives you the receipt of that payment. Another right is the right to have the apartment fit for habitation. So basically, there are some buildings that don't look like human beings should even occupy in the first place, and your landlord cannot force it on you. So you have to make sure that the landlord makes the place habitable for you before even entering into or even agreeing to enter into the tenancy agreement, because it is your right to have the place fit for habitation for you. Another right is right to personal personal property. That means you have a right to bring in your personal property, your own assets, your own personal things into that place and have it inside without any disturbance from the landlord, without it being seized by the landlord. I don't know if you understand. So basically, I mean that you can have your own property inside that. You can have your own personal property inside that building as long as your tenancy agreement is running. So no one can come in and say that why do you have this here, or why should you have this here, or you can't have this here. No, because it is a right that you have as a tenant. So another right is right to consent of improvements or alterations. Basically, you have the right to be able to make minor adjustments or alterations in the building with consent, although we have to ask for consent from the landlord. So for example, you want to paint or you want to change something in the building, you have a right to that as long as consent is given from the landlord. Another right is right to pay rent. You have a right to pay rent because that's basically the consideration between you and your landlord. So your landlord cannot say no, I'm not accepting this rent. No, you have the right to pay rent. You also have right of protection against unfair eviction. So last week we spoke about the procedures for eviction and recovery of premises. So you can go back there again just to refresh your memory, so you know that you have a right to be protected from unlawful evictions. Once those procedures are not being followed, you are to know that those are unlawful, that the procedure he is following that is different from that procedure is unlawful. So you have a right against that. You have a protection against that. You also have a right to request for the review of tenancy. But unfortunately, in Nigeria, most times it's usually the landlord that raises up that right, because most people have the fear that once the rent is reviewed, it only goes higher. But then there are some circumstances where your rent can go lower. For example, maybe a part of the premises that you have rented is demolished for a road construction or something similar to that. So you also have a right to review your rent. You also have the right to be reimbursed any payment in terms of repair with the consent of the landlord. That is where, for example, there is a damage in the property and you, with the consent of the landlord, repair it. You also have a right to also for him to reimburse you for the sum of amounts you have used to pay that, to repair that damage. You also have a right to notice of rent increment. So most times some landlords just slam you with the letter that I'm increasing your rent or this, but no, you actually have a right to that notice, and that notice is usually agreed upon in your tenancy agreement. That's why it's important for you to go through your tenancy agreement to make sure that there are some clauses that are stated there, because this notice is usually stated there. But where it is not, the landlord could give you 6 months of notice, which is the minimum requirement of a notice that should be given in case of increasement of rent. So these are basically the rights that you as a tenant have, and any landlord, any person that is going against going against this right, you can take a legal action against such person. So I want you to know that, to remember this right very well, because this is a rampant thing going on now in the country, where landlords override and try to act like those rights do not exist, but in actual sense they exist and they are protected by the law. I hope you were able to learn something today. I'll see you guys again next week with another session on law and Ascent Reality, powered by Ascent Radio. Have a lovely day.